Yeah, good afternoon. We've already heard the title, but this is my title. How can we improve what's been described as the most inefficient industrial process on Earth? And you'd have to say that looking at old tree forms and old sprayer technology, that's probably true. As we move to more regular tree forms and smarter, better matched spraying technology, that statement no longer holds. But just to try and put all this in context, we work within the framework of the AgChem labels that are the products that we're trying to spray. Product registration trials typically start with, and application rate trials typically start with hand-applied small plot treatments. And the point of runoff is the thing that you're achieving in most of these trials, and it's a visual cue. And it tends to work quite well. So this is something that the trialists respond to, and it's the basis of our chemical labels. And the rule of thumb behind that is the bigger and or denser the canopy target, the higher the volume that's required to achieve effective spray coverage. And that turns into a rate per 100 litres as a tank mixing concentration that's on fruit and vine crop labels. And the whole point about that is to allow the legal adjustment of application rates by adjusting the spray volume to match the requirements of different target canopies. And in New Zealand and Australia, we've got good tools for describing canopies as spraying targets, but they've fallen a bit out of date with some of the modern canopies and they need to be revised, but they're actually quite a good system. The maximum per hectare use rates that are appearing on some labels, particularly in New Zealand, are an environmental modelling threshold standard for avoiding adverse environmental impacts. It's got nothing to do with the rates and it's not a target. The problem that I see, and it's a significant one, is that we, and there's a big we here, researchers, sectors, regions, advisors, growers, whoever, often default to talking about chemical application rates on a per hectare basis that doesn't describe the canopy in the hectare. And if that becomes the standard, then there's a risk that we're actually trapped by our own language. So in this context, product labels are remarkably robust. You know, they inherently include a whole lot of variability in deposits. And the labels generally work, or the products generally work if you apply them at label rate effectively. The opportunity here is that because there is quite a big margin for error built into labels based on the variability in deposits from traditional canopies and traditional spraying techniques, there is this real opportunity to use less chemical effectively if we can be precise about it, but there's also a risk in that if we can't address some of the basic issues. But anyway, the rules of thumb here, the outer canopy always gets more deposit than the inner canopy. The inner and distant targets typically receive a half to a third of what the outside gets when you spray dilute to the point of runoff. And what we tend to see is if I measure deposits in a canopy and I'm seeing a 5-fold variation with the worst parts of the canopy getting a fifth of what the outside gets, I'll pretty much guarantee that there'll be control failures. So, you know, we live with a 1 to 3-fold variation as something that's sort of baked into what we do. And excessive variability is usually due to some combination of the target canopy and the sprayer and its setup and operation, and often a mismatch between the two. So looking at just digging into apple spraying, we're going through this project in New Zealand now to try and revisit. This is the first time we've done this in 20 years. We're trying to revisit the canopies that we've got. We're looking at the spraying technology that we can deliver the chemicals to those canopies, and we're trying to reset what our base rates are for different canopy training systems on different row spacings. And it's a real limiting factor that we do have so many canopy forms, and we do need to be able to describe them, classify them, and then respond to that. Another limiting factor, and this is a huge one, is we've got way too many different types of sprayers in the industry. Some of them are legacy sprayers that we're still using, and some of them are gee whiz sprayers that some grower on a holiday, tax break holiday in Europe spotted and imported. And we see quite a lot of this diversification of sprayers. And the question that I'd ask you there is, do you think there's any standout machines there in terms of good performance or potential bad performance? And if you don't know the answer to that, then this is the work that we need to do, because there's a big range of performance potential in that, and it's not just in the single-row sprayers, it's probably even worse in the multi-row sprayers. And part of the problem we've got is that sprayers are built, not researched, and then tested by selling them into the market, and you guys are the test bed for the gear that is sold. And they're built by different manufacturers to achieve some point of sales competitive advantage, not performance. So it could be the color, the tank size, the fan type, whatever. Often the points that they're selling them against don't reflect the performance of the sprayer. Another limiting factor, and a significant one, is the lack of integrated understanding of what best practice is across industry service providers, growers and staff, and we really lack relevant and practical training and crop-specific resources to help us improve things. And the scary result of that is in New Zealand and Australia, and it's not just me seeing it, it's lots of people I talk to, we can walk onto any property and about half of the sprayers on the property will have a significant fault or faults that is undetected and unaddressed. And here's a few of them. Restricted intakes, blocked filters. Jonathan Brooks loves to say pressure filters aren't unicorns. Well, sometimes I think they are. Blocked nozzles, worn nozzles or damaged nozzles. These ceramic and plastic nozzles, what we're finding is they last about 3 to 5 years. They're consumables, they need to be rolled over and replaced. Incorrect nozzles, mixed nozzle sets. There's this real issue that we see depressingly often in the industry where individual manufacturers' colour codings and then the ISO colour codings don't match, and you see mixed sets of nozzles on sprayers with completely different outputs because people have failed to identify that they've got 2 different types of nozzles from the same manufacturer. And then we get into the air part of it. Obstructed fans, wrong gear, wrong PTO speed, wrong fan speed. Join all that together, and what we're seeing as a trend in the New Zealand industry, and I assume it's happening here, is we're actually outdriving the air capacity of our sprayers. Many of them are being driven way too fast to actually deliver the spray into the tops of trees. And we're seeing a general trend for underdosing in the tops of trees. And if the response to the failure in the tops of trees is to spray more, that's probably the wrong response because you haven't actually spotted the problem and done something about it at source. And part of the problem here is that we don't use coverage assessment tools. We don't have real good feedback tools, or if we have them, we don't use them enough to confirm that spraying is effective from round to round, sprayer to sprayer, and that can be improved. So the solutions to all of this and the resulting improvements in spraying, we should be able to improve work rates. Optimised multi-row spraying is the path that a lot of people have gone down right now. In the long term, I don't think that is the path. I think that optimised single-row spraying with robotics probably is the way to go. But we also have canopy scanning and mapping as a practical tool now so that we can describe the canopies as spraying targets and set the machines to that. We can automate a whole lot of things, and different levels of automation are going to be progressively adopted and can be adopted. And then just the documentation of jobs, self-assembling spray diaries from the sprayer. And a big part of what's also flowing through this in New Zealand at least is we've got to preserve our right to farm and demonstrate that we can spray without too many off-target losses and no harm from off-target losses. Yeah, I won't say too much about the 3-row spraying, except that one of the questions that I have about 3-row spraying is you've actually got an asymmetric unit there in the sense that you've got the over-row, where the canopy is sprayed from both sides in the same travel direction, and you've got the outside row where the outside row is usually sprayed in the opposite travel direction. Have a think about which you think would perform better, because one of those, it's different, it's asymmetric. One of those setups is going to perform better than the other. And the answer to that is probably the single row on the outside, which is sprayed in the opposite travel direction, will give significantly better deposits than the one which is sprayed in the same travel direction. In the order of we expect from grape experience, and we haven't properly measured this in apples yet, but in grapes we're looking at about a 20% lift in deposit efficiency from that opposite travel direction factor. So getting into canopy scanning and mapping, that was one of the first LiDARs that I played with about 15 years ago. LiDAR is wonderful technology for defining canopy size, volume, density. And now we have cost-effective, affordable scanning tools, so this is Green Atlas fruit counting, but the LiDAR on there gives us maps at about 15 kilometres an hour. And so we can get this tree geometry, we can take that and put it into a prescription map. And if you've got a block that's showing the sort of variability that's in the heat map here, you either need to spray that block in separate pieces, or you should apply some kind of variable rate map to that, because the variability in there would definitely justify some improvement in spray application rates, consistency for the size of the trees. And the rate controllers that we have in the industry, the typical ones right now, are as crude as anything and terribly out of date. The opportunities to use pretty much the same technology, not at the high end of smart apply, but just to adapt the rate controller technology that we have right now to follow prescription maps is quite real, and there's quite a lot of that technology starting to emerge. So it doesn't have to cost the earth to do that. This is just a quick look at my experience in Australia with the first time that we were trying to do some variable rate work was back in 2019-ish. That Swarm Farm tractor offered a lot but didn't really deliver. Now, in the space of 6 years, we're looking at full robotic, fully automatic sprayers, which again haven't necessarily found their cost place in the Apple industry. And you'd have to say, through this journey, not all automation starts smart. So when Gus first came out, I couldn't really see the point of putting a dumb, incredibly crude axial fan sprayer onto a smart robot. We can do better than that, especially with the canopies that we grow now. And so, combining technologies is evolution, and the USDA smart sprayer, there isn't meant to be sound on that. That's pulse width modulated nozzles, individual nozzle control with adjustable flow rates from that, based on real-time sensing of the canopy density and size. So this combination of John Deere buying Gus and Smart Apply and pushing that out is exactly the evolution that I think we need to go through to find cost-effective and sensible solutions. And then you start to see Smart Apply as add-ons to sprayers, as sort of kit set add-ons to sprayers, which is becoming quite common in both New Zealand and Australia. And the huge question that you have to ask here is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So Smart Apply is a perfect solution for a variable canopy. The real solution here is to grow an even canopy that doesn't actually need that sort of technology, because the cost of Smart Apply is something like $70,000 as an addition to the cost of the sprayer, plus the cost of maintaining and running it. It would be much better to grow a regular canopy that doesn't have the variation, that doesn't need that sort of technology in the first place. So I'm hoping that what we'll see is maybe 1 in 10 sprayers in a fleet might include that sort of technology, which can be used on the orchard during development and where it actually offers a return, and that we can settle into some robust and smart technology that is cost-effective and delivers on the opportunity. But remember that too often basic faults compromise outcomes, and if we can't address the issues of blocked nozzles and filters and poor agitation and outdriving air assistance and not achieving coverage, and the real basic learnt stuff of not understanding what concentrate actually means and what diluters for different canopies, then we're really struggling to actually make progress. And so we've got to get these basic things right. So what happens now? I think there is a sensible and economic transition from our existing sprayer technology through to high-end precision ag. I think it will feature autonomous sprayers or swarm sprayers and probably single row. I think that we'll actually be making part of the transition is just actually putting the right rates of chemical in the right place at a block-to-block level, and then we'll transition to within-block adjustments using relatively inexpensive, like sort of $7,000 type add-on controllers, which allow you to follow prescription maps. I think that we're going to have to integrate low drift application technology for sensitive block edges, and we need to be able to do that seamlessly from the sprayer without having to go through some huge effort to reset. Just a note on that, since I've got time to talk about it, I didn't think I would have. A lot of drift management is just situation sensitivity, understanding which way the wind's going and responding appropriately and teaching operators to be able to do that. But part of it is actually applying drift reduction technologies to sprayers as well, and the European standard for that is to use a coarser spray quality. What we're measuring, so from our experience in kiwifruit, we expect coarse spraying to reduce deposits, and this is hydrogen cyanamide, high cane breaker, Dormex in kiwifruit. On a simple target like canes, just bare canes, applying a coarse instead of a fine spray quality drops deposits by about 10%. So we expected low drift spraying technology to reduce deposits in apples, and what we've measured in New Zealand is something like a 30% reduction as a result. So we have to be very, very careful how we apply somebody else's technology to our situation and make sure that it's going to work. So I think we can, but we need to do it with our eyes open and with data to support it. What else in there? I think prescription maps with sub-block adjustments using existing rate controllers is possible. The next step on from there is to actually start to apply different spray programs or rates to hotspots within orchards, and then to manage the harvest of those to actually meet the market residue requirements, where we might have actually sprayed part of a block with something that's going to leave a residue that's unacceptable. If we can pick that out ahead of the main harvest, then we've got the opportunity to still get the bulk of a block to a particular export market. So real-time sensing and adjustment of air, speed and volume is important. And a huge part of that, which I haven't really said enough about, is that when we look to calibrate sprayers into the future, we're not just going to be calibrating the water part of the delivery, we need to calibrate the air delivery to match the target canopy and the needs of the target canopy and the conditions at the time. So I think we're going to see more complexity required in the service provision, but again, it's not actually that hard to do. If you're already there to calibrate a sprayer, you should be able to calibrate the air as part of that operation. And so that really reinforces the point that we will still need trained human operators as a critical part of the whole spraying process, but the opportunities for improvement are enormous. And we've thought a lot about how we implement this, because there is a real risk of, well, put it this way, the cost of failure in terms of pest and disease control is far higher than the costs of the chemicals. And most growers have established a pattern of behaviour that is successful in terms of pest and disease control or plant growth regulator responses, and deviating from that represents quite a big risk. And so I think the pathway to improving what we do isn't going to actually come from making risky reductions or changes to our fungicide and insecticide use strategies. It will actually come from improving our responses to plant growth regulators, which is an application which costs a lot of money, and you see an outcome from that application soon after the application, and usually you've got time to fix any faults that you've found as a result of what you've done. So I think the most exciting space to drive change is to optimize our plant growth regulator responses, right through from dormancy breaking, thinning, and harvest management. So that's the area that we're devoting most of the work on. And just to explain where this is all coming from, we're running a research program which we formally only started last season in New Zealand through the Smart and Sustainable project in apples. But what we're hoping to be able to do is to extend that program and run it in parallel with the Australian apple industry. So the intention is that we can actually do some shared research across both countries. I'm collaborating, the group I'm working with is collaborating with Leachy Han from the University of Queensland on canopy identification and modelling. So there's already some synergies in the research space, and what we're hoping, and pretty much what I think the industries have agreed, is that this is a non-competitive space. So it is a space that we can actually work together into the benefit of both industries. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.